Everything for
Lynn being Lynn. Yeah, hi guys, it's the Real and Raw Show. I'm Lynn Serrano.
I'm Brian. What I was gonna say is not what actually was gonna come out because I saw the live button. So yeah, had to clean it up.
Yeah, I said to Brian before I start, remember, Lynn's gonna be Lynn. So
I'm
you're
like,
like,
what's
what?
that supposed to mean?
Well, you know what that's gonna mean here in a minute. You're like, oh
Hey,
yeah.
there's always room to discover what that is. So
Well, welcome everybody. I think you saw in the announcement we have somebody coming on, a Miss Mary Kay. So what I wanted to do was do a little intro for her. That's what I want to do. Now you know what I'm talking about. Welcome, Mary Kay.
Oh, thank you. I love that. That was so cool. I'm so excited to be here with the two of you because when I'm not working and I can catch your show, it always gives me this boost. And that laugh, Lynn, I just love that laugh of yours. Oh my God. But thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. We love you. There's no doubt about
Aw.
that. And so, yeah, I was like, I didn't have time to tell Brian that I actually went ahead and I gotta make sure I didn't have time, Brian, to tell him I did an intro for you. So that's why I said to him, he calls
Guys.
that's normal Lynn. I mean, come on now. If she was scripted, I would have to wonder if she's feeling well.
Well, welcome so much to be on our show. And I know you were watching us last week when we were talking about vulnerability, self-expression, or a bust. And we asked you to be on here, and guess what? You said yes.
I did.
So we are very thankful for that. And I'm going to turn the baton over to Brian.
Yeah. Brian so Mary Kay, what necessarily spoke to you? You know, I'm kind of curious because I'm a psychology guy. Mr. Scott's here from Florida.
Yay!
Hi, Scott. What spoke to me? What spoke to me specifically last time? I think it was at the beginning when you were talking about everybody's getting offended at everything immediately, and you know, I think of the word snowflake. I live in Canada, and I think that's very true. And because I've lived, 55 years, I've seen a lot of changes over time, and I think, us Gen Xers have been subjected to many things and many changes, and I think a lot of us are able to adapt, and maybe some of the younger generation just hasn't had enough hands-on experience yet to understand that we don't need to be offended. We can just sort of shrug. Taylor Swift says shake it off, or whatever her song says. I'm just like, whatever. And I shrug it off. But I wasn't always that way. Right. So that's what really got me from the last show.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
That was a great question, Brian. And I think it is true that, that Gen X, which you're a part of as well, is, we were to be seen, not heard. And with that, we had the feelings, we were sensitive, but we had to learn how to get by. And then we learned that it was a good thing that we kept those things in. I mean, I guess the older you get, the wiser you get. So, I think we realized the purpose of why we were treated and were brought up the way we were, because they were just trying to make us better than they were. But that backfired, because then we went ahead and let our kids be more lenient things, that generation, the next generation to come along. And that didn't work either.
Right.
So, I mean, now it just have to be vulnerable, accept who you are, accept everybody else that's different from you. And I mean, when I say accept, meaning that, some people have problems with all the different diversity and, the inclusions and all these different things. But the point is we should have the right to be, and, people don't have to agree of who you are, but let them be. Don't mock them. Don't don't waste your energy. Just,
I think that a true test of if you're, and obviously every day is going to be different, right? The chemicals in our brain, the proper rest, the diet, the sleep, and exercise that we get, it's all going to vary. But the more that we waver from being our self-belief, the more we waver from that on a regular basis, the more we would become vulnerable to not even knowing who we are, right? And the thing about it is that there's never going to be any agreement for that in the world. We have to have that ourselves. And so the more that people are just kind of living life aimlessly, going through it without being aware of who they are, what they stand for, what they don't, who they're going to tolerate, I think you get on this hamster wheel. And it's very unfortunate because you could go through your whole life without really, just kind of drifting through it, without really knowing who you are or who you're going to surround yourself with. It's just kind of, people are there, but you really never look at it deeper than that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a daily commitment. It's also with a daily journey that you're going to be who you're going to be. If somebody does not like you, that's okay. But you're not willing to waver from who you've committed yourself to be.
You want to read what Scott wrote there real
Sure.
quick?
So Scott says, today people are basing their self-esteem on what is said around them and about them. We are overwhelmed by being PC, politically correct, so no one gets their feelings hurt. Where's the self-worth? And I think too, is that when we tie in business, what's it for? It's about the bottom line. It's about getting another business deal or whatever. But if you have to sacrifice who you are just to get those dollars, okay, I get it. Everybody's got to pay their bills. But at the same time, guess what? That mindset is not going to go away.
Good example. Remember, I think it was a bakery that didn't want to do a cake for, a couple, I think a lesbian couple or something like that, that were going to get married.
Yep.
I'm like, really? You're going to disrespect human beings in a service that you're doing because of your personal beliefs?
Well,
I'm just saying, like, what's wrong with treating people kind and
well, universally, right?
Yeah.
Because in their eyes, there's a reason for why they do it. And I don't side one way or another, but it's like, we view it as disrespect. They view it as whatever, right?
Right.
Instead of it being like, okay, it doesn't, and I serve, in the wedding industry, I serve, same sex couples, anybody.
Right.
Because the identity of who they go as should make no difference about how they want to feel in their wedding day.
That's what I'm saying. Like, a lot of businesses or something, that's like, if you said, no, I don't want to do same marriage or same people thing. I'm not saying it right, and I'm sorry about that. But my point is what I'm getting at is, to me, that sounds like what you're doing, Brian, is you're saying, look, I love what I do. I care. I care about the service I do, but you know what? There's my rules. If you're not the kind of people I want you to be, or you don't accept my thing, that's what I mean. There's got to be a line where you say, really, you're really showing your true colors when you are not. You say you serve people, you want to help people, but you're saying, oh, I'm only going to serve the rich, the poor, this or that. I mean, I'm just saying that if you're going to be in a business, it's different than being a regular person and having your own values and staying here. But you do need to open up as a business owner and realize your doors, if you want to be a good business person, your doors need to be open to everyone.
Well, and I would even be willing to say that you declare who you serve and who you don't.
Right.
Because it's like, okay, the upset that, I don't know this couple, or, the upset that they had with this bakery, but it's like, okay, here's who I serve and here's who I do not serve. Right.
Yeah.
The upset came because we invested our time in a possibility that we might want to have our cake made by this person, instead of the business declaring, here's who we serve and here's who we don't serve.
Yeah.
And then the couple would have never went there in the first place.
Right.
Wasting their time, energy, and all of that. And obviously making them upset by the fact that, is it that they couldn't serve us, or is it the fact that we wasted our time with somebody that didn't know who they served in the first place?
Right. But
or
that's
was
what I'm
willing to
saying.
say.
That's what I'm saying. They opened up their business without their, here comes a Long Island accent. They opened up their business without their clause of that. Right. So opening up your business and not having that little underlying caution things saying, look, we serve, but we don't serve these people, or blah, blah, blah. You opened up yourself to service. That's what I'm saying. So if you don't have those conditions and clauses in any business you plan to do, you better figure that out before you do that.
Well, and you cannot blame somebody, i.e. the prospective customer, for not knowing what they don't know about who you serve.
Yeah.
Right? It is not their mission to identify who a customer is or who isn't. They just know if they want to have their cake there, taken care of or not.
And this is all example. We're not debating the issue here, people. So I don't want my hate mail or nothing like that. So, go ahead. I don't own anything for you to sue, but all the point is just as an example. And as far as business and knowing that, there's a vulnerability to say, I'm Christian based. This is what my Bible, or, different things. I mean, you can express yourself as a business owner, but express yourself and stay there, and oh, here we go. Well said, Mr. Kelm. Yep.
Mr. Kelm. You can call me Brian. It's okay, Scott.
Restaurants can't be forced to serve a vegan menu. Right,
and see that's like, and I always want to give credit where credit's due. Scott McCain, storyteller, presenter extraordinaire, business guy, master of distinction, said he goes through an exercise in a lot of his teachings about who you serve and who you don't serve, right? Now, from my understanding of businesses and people that I've studied and observed, most business owners do not fulfill upon, in my opinion, it's a project, it's an ongoing thing. But what happens is that they don't look at who their customer is not, because that'll open up for everybody that is, for whatever reason. It might look dark, it might be negative, but it's like all of the upset that happens in business is from, in my opinion, now this is just my opinion, from people you should not be working with. But you haven't put your ground rules, you haven't desensitized yourself to whatever those manifestations are, right? If you get stood up in a coffee shop, if they don't communicate with you effectively, all of those like little things that upset us as business owners and as people that serve others are things to put in the category about who I don't serve, right? Yeah. But we don't commit to it. We see somebody potentially as another paycheck, which is, unfortunately, it should go deeper than that, in my opinion. But at the same time, the more somebody is perceived only as greenbacks or as a paycheck, the less likely any of this, who my customer is or who my customer is not, is going to matter. Yeah. And that's unfortunate,
I want to say thank you, Ron, for showing up. Yeah. We appreciate you. And he came for the beautiful Mary Kay. Mary Kay.
Hi, Ron.
So what's your 2 cents on everything?
So my 2 cents, I completely agree that as a business owner, I want to make sure that whoever I'm serving, I'm able to help them. And one of the ways I'm able to help them is if we have at least some kind of dovetail of values. So if our values aren't going to be in alignment, or at least some kind of a bit of a dovetail or a crossover, then I shouldn't be chasing them and they shouldn't be chasing me. And so, when I'm looking at somebody as a coaching client, I want to vet them as much as they want to vet me. 100%. And I think that's a really important thing that sometimes we do forget, and businesses maybe like that bakery has forgotten. And it's also part of our personal brand as well, right? Like our self-expression. We're going to express ourselves, and maybe that'll change over the decades of our life. In my 20s, I was kind of like this and people saw me like this. Now I feel I have a lot more control over, what I put out there and how people perceive me. Although it's more about, I want people to know me. I want people to know who I am, and how can I do that? So that touches on the point, Brian, that you were saying that, we should have customer boundaries, I guess, defined. So it's a little bit about boundaries too.
Go ahead, Lynn. Go ahead.
No, I just was going to say, I think it's funny because if you're the paying customer, why would you go see Brian or you and say, gosh, I just don't click with them? Yeah. Why would I want to give you the money? I mean, like, they're showing me that they're not clicking with me. Why want to give them the money. And so, but then yet, then the sad thing is it's not, it's my fault if I'm going to force myself to say, Brian, but you're going to do my wedding. Why do I want to do that? I mean, why put yourself through that? And yet people, Brian, but you did 10 of my friends' weddings and you need to do mine. But there were fits, you weren't. I mean, it's really.
I was thinking about it as Mary Kay was talking, that when you sacrifice your recipe or your process, that's when you fall victim to accepting whatever comes. And then the riffraff, the friction, it butts heads 100% with your ideal customer of somebody that it's a great experience. Everybody wants to be guided. They trust your expertise. They trust the process, or they have a problem with everything. And then you wonder why there's friction is because you took shortcuts.
Yes.
You did not run this prospective customer through a system or a set of feelings or whatever it might be to make sure that they were, that you could help them. And I don't like when people say, I automatically go to the word help, because it's an honest assessment about from not only the service provider to the customer, but also the customer to the service provider. Do you feel like I can help you the best out of anybody? And also, though, connecting with your heart, do I feel like I can connect with them? Do I feel like, if in terms of word of mouth referrals in my industry, do I envision writing a wedding anniversary card to them or keeping in touch 15 years down the road? Because if I don't, well, then that's guiding me in terms of where I need to be, and if I can offer them my best or not.
Yeah. And Scott Jones says, Mary Kay, wonderful to hear your viewpoint. Absolutely. And that's why we are so glad she's here. And
Thank you.
Did you want to add to what Brian just said?
Yeah. So I think it's just, if you're working with somebody that really is not your fit, so we'll talk about it as a fit, then that's, an hour, 2 hours, a year maybe of your time that you're never getting back.
Yep.
And I know that's a selfish way to look at it, but it's true. And why spend time with people who are not your people? And if we do find somebody that is our person, for sure they're going to know other people that are like them, and your business can grow that way through word of mouth from the ideal customer.
And I think too, you're touching on something, Mary Kay, that most people will not do, because they want the least amount of resistance to the dollars, instead of making sure that I can serve you the best, like really connected all the way to the review, all the way to the outcome of whatever that person declares that they want out of the training or out of the wedding or whatever, where you can be honest and upfront with yourself, and you're not following the money, you're following the outcome, you're following their development. And I think that one of the most humbling things that can ever be said to a customer in a very civil, calm, friendly way, I don't know if I'm the right person for you.
Right. And yet people say, I knew I shouldn't have hired Brian or Mary Kay or Lynn or whatever. If you knew that, why aren't you following your freaking instinct? That's why you have everybody has intuition, people. And that's one thing that gets me is like, okay, so when did you figure out this was going to be bad? Since the beginning. Okay, then whose fault is it? Listen to yourself. Listen.
If it doesn't start well, it's never going to end well.
No, exactly. And that's the huge point I'm saying here. Let's be vulnerable and admit, I was right, or I was wrong, and I knew this wasn't going to. Well, if you knew, then you're at fault. Just stop the rest of the conversation. Don't go down that.
And this is a perfect time to share this. And I've thought this for many years, but my industry does not, for whatever reason, they do not publicize or talk about this. Is that just because a prospective customer has money, number one, doesn't mean it's best spent with me. Number two, is that it seems like, and maybe in your industries, but it's like, just because they're the prospective customer does not mean that you don't, it's like, well, I have money and I'm looking to spend it, but also though I have my credibility and reputation to uphold, right? So I'm interviewing you as much as you're interviewing me.
Yeah.
And I think that interview from the seller to the buyer perspective is missing, because most people only want to do what it takes to get the money, but they also, though, that's where the commodity kind of comes in, versus like, okay, here's the cost of my coaching, here's the cost for the event. You know what I mean? So they almost like sacrifice their own identity to get those dollars, but without a thought of like, okay, my differentiation is X.
And the thing is I think the huge takeaway for me is that people need to be open-minded, period.
Yep.
Okay, you may not like the way they dress, you may not like their accent, you may not like these few things, but if they have something of value that you really seen, like you've been to 10 of Brian's weddings and you're like, he might be quirky, let me open up and see if I can, what is it about him? Get over your initial thoughts on what that whole thing is that you perceive, and give it a second try to figure out if you can see it from a different lens. Yeah. People don't do that either, because then later they go talk to somebody else. Well, I didn't get it. Well, and they're like, well, did you know that, he went through this, or he's this guy that did this or that? And they're like, wow, I didn't know that. Well, you didn't open your senses to actually know the person and see why. So in other words, it's like if somebody tells you to see a movie and they're like, and you think that, whatever, and you go see the movie and you're like, oh, now I get what the sense of what they like, why they like it or that. Or you may disagree and say, okay, they have a different viewpoint. But when people are opening up to show you who they are, they're telling you who they are. It's your damn fault when you don't see it.
Right. Well, and I also think too is that, and I've said this for many years, and I don't get a lot of inquiries anymore from people that haven't seen of me or heard of me. And I've created that over 30 years, right? It's like at every wedding, there's always at least one couple in the audience, is what the statistics say. But it's like, why would I want to go right to social media or something like that of somebody that has no experience, right? Yeah. Instead of, but here's the thing, I can't help somebody that doesn't want to be helped. They have to show some engagement. They have to show some involvement. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, even if you want me to plan your wedding from A to Z and the outcome, I still need to know what's going on in here.
Yeah.
That I cannot do without you being involved.
That's what we're talking about, the vulnerability, self-expression, or bust. I mean, if you're sincerely open to the customer or the guest or whoever and anything, you can pair yourself up better by being first honest to yourself of what you want and what you don't want. And we don't have that. Instead, we think we have to give a package deal or take this or take that without ever asking questions. And that's where we all falter, is not asking the questions for us to make, having the good questions, asking the questions that'll make a definitive outcome for you.
Well, and I'm a huge fan of challenging prospective customers, not from a standpoint of friction, but from a standpoint of creating something that they never knew was possible for their day. And that's how I'm wired, like power questions, things that really gets them to think about, hey, that moment before you're introduced out for your first dance, how do you want to feel?
Yeah. And Mary, what's your feedback on that as far as a coaching client for you?
Yeah, same for me. A lot of times I want to know what their vision is, or while we're getting to that vision, to try and get them to know, what is that going to feel like once they transition to this other thing that they say they want? Do they really understand what it's going to feel like? And can they tell me what it's going to feel like? And of course, that's going to ignite their, dopamine or whatever other brain chemicals are. And then they're going to attach themselves to that feeling, yes, which is something that I can then use with them as we're going through the process as a motivator, right? Emotion is one big motivator to get them to do what they need to do, what they want to do, so they can get where they want to go. So back to the basics of how our brains work and harnessing that.
I love that. Yeah, and that's the thing, people don't understand. Service, products, it doesn't matter. If you don't take actions one way or another, nothing happens.
Yeah. I think too, as well as, especially for something like long term, like Mary Kay, when somebody comes to you and they want to move the needle for this part of their life, or they want to remove a blind spot from their view, right? It's like, okay, if I'm willing to hold you accountable to that, are you okay with that? Where I'm going to fulfill upon everything I'm going to do as your coach, but also though, are you willing to do everything that it's going to take? That's going to be uncomfortable. 9 months, 10 months, however long the training is, because if I hold you accountable to this, because that's what you're coming to me for. You're coming to me to move this needle. It's going to take me and you working together, but are you ready for that? Where I'm going to challenge you. I might make you feel uncomfortable, but you're coming to me right now with the emotion where it's at. Are you okay with me pushing you to get to where you want to be? It's their declaration to you, and it's like after they get involved in something, they're more than likely to retract it because they're looking at the whole process all at once versus step by step.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point, Brian, because one of my big sayings is, okay, first we're going to think big, and then we're going to shrink big. So that's think big, then shrink big. And shrink big is like you're saying is, okay, let's go back. We're going to figure out the milestones, and you're going to commit to these, and you're going to tell me how I'm going to hold you accountable, because that's what you're paying me for. Because otherwise you wouldn't need me, right? If you could have done it by yourself, you would have done it already. And that's why we're here. And so think big, then shrink big, and be accountable and have that agreement. So a lot of coaching is a bunch of tiny agreements along the way in general, and then along the way as well.
One of the most fulfilling things is when they declare to you, right? So it's not this ambiguous thing, but when they declare to you what they want to move the needle on, if it's coaching or how they want to feel on their wedding day or whatever that is that you can always go back to that, but it's like to harness that, to get them to share it is the biggest piece, because now it's on paper. Now it's something to move towards instead of it being ambiguous and they never declare it. Well, obviously it's kind of like coaching, right? Or like being under video, like in an acting coach. Well, that's not what I normally do for X. Well, do what you normally do for X, so then I can give you critique based on actually what I saw on video, right? A lot of people want to kind of dodge that because then they have an out to be held accountable to, versus if it's something like, okay, here's what you said. Now here's what I'm holding myself accountable that you get. A lot of people they don't want to come clean on that, on what they're committing to, because then they get an out if they don't do it, and then they have a reason to blame somebody else.
It just reminds me of the people that go ahead every year, and you'll know what I'm talking about when I say the month of January. People go and get that membership, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then they never show up. But where's the fault there? You put your dopamine with the good intentions of putting the money in, but nothing comes out till you do something. And the vulnerability is saying, okay, it's October, I've been paying the whole year, but I'm going to go and start going to the gym now. I mean, I think that's the vulnerability is to admit to yourself, okay, I've effed up this far. Now, what am I going to do about it? And we forget. Don't say, well, shit, I just lost 11 months of this year. But, don't look at what was past. Look at it from this moment, and that's where we need to express our admission. I think until you can admit things, especially out loud, admitting, I've effed up, let me move on. And, be vulnerable to that. And, be more expressive to say, this is where I am now, and I'm going to get better.
I think that's also a creation, right? It's got to be created both ways, not only from the seller to the buyer, but the buyer to the seller, right? Because if a customer cannot be open and honest with who's serving them, there's a problem. But also the vice versa, and it's kind of like Mary Kay in your coaching, as I'm just envisioning, it's like, okay, vulnerability for somebody to say to you, I haven't fulfilled upon what I said I was going to do to get the result, right? But then also, though, it could be on you, is like, hey, I've had a lot going on. I'm not making any excuses, but here's what I'm going to do for you. You own it, you restore it, and then you move on. You don't bury, you don't ignore it. You just leave it where it needs. You know, you take accountability for it. You take ownership of it versus like, well, I hope that they don't talk about this. There's no authenticity to that.
Thank you, Colin, for saying that. Honesty is a two-way street. Absolutely.
Yep.
Hi, Colin.
Thank you for
Colin.
watching. We need to wrap this up here soon, or any minute now. So, Mary Kay, do you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
In closing, I think a lot of our lives we have these beliefs that are limiting or they're disempowering. And you know, I posted something a little while ago about the things that we worry about, and it's like 91% of the things that we worry about, according to a Penn State study, 91% of the things we worry about are never going to happen.
Yeah.
So we're wasting precious mental, emotional, physical energy sometimes on worrying. And I think a lot of times, because I can get into the worry spiral too, you know, I've got my own techniques, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm worrying about all this stuff. But then I always ask myself the question, okay, is that true? Is it like, what are the chances really? And what are the chances of it not happening? And how about I create another scenario opposite to that one? So I think, you know, just having some recognition in yourself of when you're actually worrying about something that is probably never going to happen is beneficial.
I love that. And yeah, and things that is any of this going to matter in 5 minutes, 5 months, 5 weeks, 5 years? And you're like, no, will you even remember it in 5 months from now, you know? So it really is, you know, being vulnerable and, you know, and realizing we don't need all the junk that we do carry in our minds. Brian?
A couple words just come to mind is show up differently in everything you do, and be you always. Whatever that looks like, don't sell out to the circumstance, the situation, whoever you're around to try to be somebody you're not, because the consistency is what you have to live with, good, bad, or other.
Oh, Brian, I love that. And I love what you said, Mary. And I want to thank you again, Mary, for being here. I love and appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Lives that you'll be on with me, I'm sure. But as far as vulnerability is, like, you know, take accountable for what you say, for what you do. Be, you know, expressive to like learn who you are, because once you learn who you are, half the battle is over, you know. And Scott, thank you so much for watching on your break. I appreciate that. Love you so much. He's from the Lynn and Scott Show. So, and as we all see it. And so I really loved this topic with you guys today to really talk about vulnerability and self-expression. I mean, like you said, Brian, if you know who you are and you're going to be true to who you are, then that's half the battle of knowing how you're going to show up to other places and show up how you be, and know, well, you know, I get invited to things, but I don't come, or whatever it is. Just own who you are and say, that is me. And if we did that more with each other, then we know what the expectations are, and you won't ever be disappointed either. So I want to thank you guys so super much for being here. Love you, Brian. I love you, Mary Kay.
Thank you. I love you guys too.
Stay right there. We'll be right back. Thanks, you guys. Tomorrow's Friday. That means enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you next week. Love you guys.
Thanks, everyone. Love you.
Thank you.
Bye.